One last video that I'd like us to watch as we finish. This is where I need God's guidance, because I feel like he's taken me away from the notes that I'd written. Today has been a lot about sharing stories of people who have been impacted because of debt and the work that CAP have been doing in people's lives. The passage we were going to be looking at is talking about something called fasting. So fasting is where you give up for a period of time something, like food, for example, for a given period of time. So you abstain from something with a purpose in mind. So that's the principle behind fasting. And you read about it in Scripture. Jesus did it. So it's something that it's a practice that can really help us. And the passage that we were talking about is actually quite harsh. I sometimes read the Bible and think, boy, that's a bit tough. And the passage talks about the prophet Isaiah saying to the Israelites, you have got it all wrong. You're basically saying to people, look at how good I am. I'm fasting. I'm doing all these things. Look at what a humble, great person I am. And I really felt that God challenged me about this whole time we're spending today to do the exact opposite. That's partly why we didn't have the offering of food during our service. I wanted it to be almost a quiet, subtle thing. These are wonderful gifts, and I want to thank you for them on behalf of the families. But I don't want us to be sort of parading, and I know you wouldn't, but I don't want us to be walking down the aisle with our bags of stuff that we've been blessed with and throw them onto the front and sort of wander back up the aisle back to our seats. And I know you won't, in one sense, you won't do that. But if you're like me, sometimes I maybe do that in my heart. I feel a little bit like God has blessed me, and I almost want to make myself feel a bit better. I want to give to people, but maybe my motives aren't as they should be. I want to do stuff to people. And actually, I don't think that's what people want. People want to be blessed by God, and people do need stuff, but they need us to be doing it with the right motives. And I've been really struck with that over my whole time of working with CAP, that I don't want to do stuff to people. I want to draw alongside them. One of the things that fasting can often do is it can give us the opportunity to sacrifice something. So we're giving something up, and we're doing that before God. And we're saying to God, we are willing to give something up. But if you're going to consider that, if you're going to consider giving something up, can I challenge you and challenge me to make it something that actually hurts? Because, I don't know, I joke about this a lot. I could give up Brussels tomorrow. But giving up Brussels isn't going to do anything to me, is it really? Because I never eat them because I hate the things. So I need to be thinking, if I'm going to give something up, I need to be really digging deep and thinking, okay, God, what is it you want to challenge me to give up that actually is a sacrifice, a real sacrifice? So that I can then go to God and say, look, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to give up hot food for a given period of time. Because for a lot of families, that's what they don't have. So I'd like to challenge you to think about the practice of fasting, to giving something up. But I want you to do it with the right motives, and I want to encourage you to sacrifice something that maybe is going to hurt. It's going to make it feel a little bit uncomfortable. I want us to be people that are real and authentic. They are two words that I've had in my head for so many years. As church, as Christians, that's exactly who we should be, real and authentic. And maybe sometimes I'm not. Maybe sometimes I do put on a face. I put on a facade. And I sometimes don't walk in the shoes of other people. That's partly why the kids are doing what they're doing here. They are drawing around their feet-ish And what's the idea is they're going to try and avoid stepping on their footprints, but walking other people's shoes. And I'd like you to think about that. I'd like you to be challenged to think about doing that. And I don't know what that looks like for you. In this time of being real and authentic, I wanted to share with you something that's happened literally overnight. You probably noticed my wife, Lisa's not here today. Now, sadly, she has epilepsy, and last night she had another seizure. And that's really hard. As a husband, watching that happen to your wife is a difficult thing. But that's nothing compared to what she's had to go through. Absolutely nothing. So God's challenged me in the middle of something quite horrible. What can I do so that maybe I can walk in Lisa's shoes? Now, that doesn't mean me having epileptic seizures, but it means me sacrificing something and saying to God, I want to give something up. I want to almost hurt for my wife so that I can really have an understanding of what it's like to go through what she's going through. I don't think I ever will. I don't think that's possible unless we go through those kind of situations. So something horrible that's happened, but somehow God has used that to pinpoint something in my life. And maybe God's doing that for you. Maybe you've been watching the news over these last few weeks, and it is so hard at the moment to watch the news. Sometimes I say I don't do it deliberately because it's just too much. But actually, I think I need some of the stuff that's going on in Israel and Hamas at the moment, and I need to sink in. And maybe that's something we can do. We can fast for the situation that's going on in Israel at the moment. We can come before God and saying, we don't know what to do. These people are suffering horrendously. And I don't understand what's going on. It's beyond my mind. But all I see is people suffering. I'm not. Going to be honest, I'm not. I have a comfortable life. So I want to maybe challenge myself to make my life a little more uncomfortable so that I can walk in the shoes of those people who are going through utter turmoil. And then for the families of Cap, Lee has gone through some really difficult times. I don't know what it's like for Lee to go through what he's going through. I've got to know him and I can hear his story and I can sort of understand because I've done this job for 13 years now, but that's not true. I don't understand. I really don't. But I want to get better at understanding what it's like. So I want to challenge us as a church to think what we could do. I want to encourage us as well, because I don't want it to be that you feel that you've come this morning and you've been backed into a corner and Tim said, I need to go home and fast now. I can't have my Sunday dinner now because Tim's going to make me feel guilty. Please do not take that away from here today. That's not that's not what God is saying. What he has a habit of doing is nudging us. And I think overnight, he's nudged me. And I hope he's sitting there, and I hope he's amongst you now, nudging you and saying, what can you do? And he'll do it individually. But listen to his voice. Be receptive to what he has to say to you. But can I encourage you to then go ahead and do it? And who knows what can happen if you do that? When we humble ourselves before God, we get on our knees, we sacrifice, we fast and we pray, and we say to God, I'm giving some stuff up because I want something to change. I genuinely believe it moves God's heart. I really believe that. So your actions can make a difference. Even in the situation in Israel, in Hamas, even in the lives of our Cap families, if you're willing to do that, I believe it makes a difference. It makes a difference to us, because it makes us connect more with people, but actually more importantly, it connects us with God, and he hears the cries of our heart, and it moves him. I really do believe that. It moves him. So can I encourage you to be thinking and praying about that? I don't really want to say anything more this morning. I know that's only a very short little word, but I don't think there's much more that we can actually say. I'm going to play a little video that kind of backs up a little bit about this. Do you remember, those of you that in church last week, I came to the front and I was wearing Rach Miller's shoes, which Graham thought were my slippers, but they were actually Rach's shoes. Because I wanted to try and say, if we do what's said on this video, it gives us a little bit of an understanding of what it's like to walk in the shoes of some of the cat families we come into contact with. So let's just watch this video just quickly and see what it says.
What could you live without for 1 week? Your car? Your phone? What about your heating? Socialising? Or even talking? Meat or fresh fruit and veg are luxuries for some. Could you give them up? What about hot food? So many of our clients live without things we take for granted. Show your support by being one of the 500 people who live a week without for CAP. What will you give up?
So I hope you heard what I just heard. Tim, what would you give up? And I think actually God put your name in that place instead. So hopefully you heard your name before, what will you give up? And I think that's God's nudge. That's God's prompting to you. It's not Tim's prompting. It's not Chris's prompting. It's not even Cap's prompting. We're just facilitating what God, I think, is doing. So can I encourage you to do what's been suggested on there? Have a think. And I mentioned it last week to give you a bit of sort of heads up. But have a think about what maybe you could give up. And if you're willing to do that, and if it means that you're not spending as much money, would you then be willing to give that money that you've then sacrificed towards the work of CAP? Take it a stage further. Because I know when I've done fasting in the past, don't find it easy, but when I've done it, it's cheaper because you're not eating as much food. But I've still got the same amount of money coming in. So why not think about using that money to give to others? So if you want to do that, again, no pressure. But come and have a word with Chris or myself. We can talk to you about how you can do that. So I hope you don't feel judged. I hope you don't feel that you had a finger pointed at you this morning. I hope you felt a nudge from God, from God's Spirit into your hearts today, and that you go away thinking, maybe I can do something. I can do something different. Thank you for bearing with me. I've got lots of notes and pictures and things that I was going to share. It's not really, I didn't feel it was right to go through all of that this morning. Kids, thank you so much. Have you managed to do some cards for me? Look at this. We've got a whole load of Christmas cards that the kids have done. So already there's some action happening. So they've actually given up their time to actually do that, which is fantastic. Thank you, kids. Really appreciate that. And Heather, did they manage to walk in other people's footsteps? Look at that. Maybe you want to try before you go. Try and walk in somebody else's footsteps, just as a reminder as you go out today. So have a think about that. Should we close? Yeah, let's close in worship, Chris. I think, yeah, I'd said to Chris we probably wouldn't do this, but let's close as we sing a final song, just as our time comes to an end.